There is a lot of anger amongst West Ham fans at the moment, and some of it is directed at the board, some of it is directed at Mohammed Kudus, and some fans venting at both Kudus and the board. And it's totally understandable why there is a lot of anger at this moment in time. And this video is not condoning what the West Ham board have done. I want to make that really, really clear. It's not condoning what they've decided to do with the whole Mohammed Kudus sale, but I'm trying to make sense of it and putting bits together and information that I've been receiving and information that I've been reading, etc. I'm trying to make sense of why they've gone about what they did in the manner that they did. I wanted the dust to settle before I did this video. I was going to do one on Wednesday evening, but I thought, just hang on. I know there's a lot of content out there at the moment from some really good West Ham channels. And I thought, let that pass, gather my thoughts, and then talk about Kudus here on Thursday morning. But it seems the fan base is going to be in meltdown probably for some time to come. And I'm guessing that the fan base might continue to be in meltdown as a moth. Fan base might continue to be in meltdown until we see how our new season pans out. Now, if we don't go out and buy the players that we need to buy, if we don't hit the ground running when the season starts, the meltdown is just going to get worse. It undoubtedly will be. But if we get the players that we need, if we actually start doing quite well in the league, and if we go through the season doing well, then I guess the meltdown will die down. So what I'm saying is, it's all down to what happens it's all down to what happens before this transfer window shuts, and it's all down to what happens when the season ends, whether the fan base will look back on whether the Mohammed Kudus sale to Tottenham Hotspur was a good or bad thing. Now, I understand the meltdown. You know, we've just sold our supposed prized asset to one of our closest rival, or, you know, for many fans, our closest rivals in the Premier League, for what it looks to be a knockdown price. He's the first player to be sold to Spurs since Scott Parker way back in 2011. And if he is a success at that North London club, their fans are going to make sure that we're never going to live this down. Now, the fact that he has been sold for as low as £55 million sticks in the throat. But what else do we do? What else could we have done here? Should we have kept a player who clearly doesn't want to be at West Ham United? Now, it all started, of course, around about 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon when David Ornstein tweeted that West Ham had agreed the sale of Mohammed Kudus to Spurs for £55 million. Now, although at this moment in time, the deal is not 100% agreed, it's as near as damn it. I would imagine that the deal not being 100% is probably reliance on the player passing his medical, which has been booked in for later on today on Thursday. Now, what is interesting is that I've been told that the player himself had put in a transfer request in order to get this deal over the line. Now, whether that's being corroborated or not, I don't know. I received it from a source, but, you know, I'm going to take all information I get with a pinch of salt in this day and age, because you never know what message people want to put out there. So I'm saying that's the information I got. I'm not saying it's 100% true. Now, even if it was, why does this matter? Why does a transfer request make any difference? Well, it matters for a number of reasons. Firstly, it clearly shows Kudus' intention to leave and leave only for Spurs. Secondly, it sent out a clear message to other clubs who might have been interested in the player that he didn't want to sign for them. He only wanted to sign for one club, hence putting those clubs off. Which means, thirdly, and here's the crucial reason for why this transfer went through for the value that it did, or one of the main reasons, is it scuppered things in terms of bidding wars. You know, had Kudus not made his mark, then I'm sure the likes of Chelsea and one or two other clubs would have actually turned up and said, okay, we want to put a bid in for him. But if you already know that a footballer wants to go to a particular club, what's the point of bidding for him? You know you're not going to get him. You know you're not going to be able to persuade him otherwise. Now, I did suggest a couple of times that Kudus may well have wanted to stay in London. And with Arsenal not showing real intent, and with the potential that at Chelsea, Kudus might not have become their main player. Remember, I mentioned the other day that as part of a squad, he might only get to play only a handful of games in the Champions League, or might focus only on the Premier League because Enzo Maresca likes to divvy up his squad, one to concentrate on the league, the other to concentrate on Europe and football and cup competitions. So in a way, whether we liked it or not, Spurs was always likely to be his destination. Now, of course, had this been Daniel Levy and West Ham were trying to buy Mohammed Kudus from Spurs, he would have probably turned around and said, here's the price, take it or leave it. And many fans are rightly asking, why didn't we do the same? Why didn't we do a take it or leave it sort of approach? But with West Ham telling the whole world that we had to sell before we could buy, and with Kudus only wanting to go to Tottenham Hotspur, I guess we're on a hiding to nothing. Now, another reason suggested as to why West Ham accepted £55 million is apparently because of the payment terms, which were suggested, reported to be favourable, as a higher portion of that 55 million would be paid as a fixed fee and not through add-ons and stuff like that. Now, this kind of contradicts what the senior source has said, where apparently senior source has said the payment terms were not great, but given that Spurs were the only show in town, the club felt that they had no choice but to proceed with the sell. You see what I mean when you've given information? You know, someone's going to counter it. However, despite what is deemed to be a much smaller fee for the player to leave, the board have confirmed that all the money will be used to bring in new players. Now, that's again a quote provided by the senior source. So let's see him put his money where his mouth is, because we are now expecting at least 2 or 3 players to come in pretty imminently. Now, what about this bank loan? There's a bank loan that's got to be paid off by the 15th of July of £40 million. Now, from what I understand, despite Mr. Whetstone trying to, throw the cat amongst the pigeons, provisions have already been made to clear that loan. So it is good to hear that the money, the 55 million, of course, we're not getting all that in advance, but then we never buy or sell players for the whole amount of money coming into our bank account tomorrow. But from what we hear, the money is guaranteed from the sale of Kudus to go towards player purchases. Now, about the fee. At the end of the season, last season, many West Ham fans were saying, get rid of him. Get rid of Mohammed Kudus. We'd be lucky to get our money back. He's not worth 50 million or any more than that because of the poor season he's had. And he looked like he didn't care. He didn't celebrate any goals. He just looked as if he had checked out quite a long time ago. So many fans stated that they couldn't wait to see the back of him. But what makes this whole issue a lot worse are 2 things, really. First, it's because psychologically, we thought that even though we wouldn't get anywhere near the £85 million that was in his release clause, a palatable 60, £65 million might have been accepted. But the second issue, of course, and I think the bigger issue, is that we've sold him for that sort of money, 55 million, to Spurs. So, given all that, we've got to find some, what I'm like, I'm going to try and find some positives in this. Got no choice. Got to find some positives. Now, the first positive is that for a change, we've actually made a profit on a player when we have become accustomed to, acclimatized to, losing money on players that we sell. All right, a smaller profit, 17, 18 million pounds, but a profit nonetheless. Secondly, it does now mean that we can crack on and get new players through the door, and the senior source's comments that all the money is going to be used for player purchases is not only a welcome relief, but as I said, we've got to now see that happening in action. It means that we can go for players who will buy into Graham Potter's ethos. If they agree to come to West Ham, it's because they want to be at the club. We haven't got European football to offer, so it must be that they believe in what Graham Potter and Carl Corley are trying to put together. Now, by putting in a transfer request, Mohammed Kudus has reminded us that there's no loyalty in football anymore. Now, sure, if someone like Freddie Potts or George Earthy make it into the West Ham senior team and then they turn around and say, we want to be transfer listed, we want to go, that's a completely different matter. They're players that have been brought up by West Ham. They've been through the academy. They're West Ham through and through. But Mohammed Kudus? Well, the same Mohammed Kudus, I guess, who wasted no time in dumping Ajax when they were going through a tough time in order to come to West Ham. Now, we knew what we were getting. An ambitious player who thought West Ham were a good team at that moment in time because we were offering European football. But now he's slapped in a transfer request as soon as things started to get a little bit tough at the club. Is that the sort of player we want at West Ham United? We talk about mercenaries in the game of football, and Kudus has reminded us just how mercenary football can really be. Sure, I get it. He wants to play in Europe and more specifically Champions League, and we couldn't offer that. But that's understandable. I get I get it. His dream will come true. Let's see now how long his loyalty remains at Spurs if they play one season in the Champions League and then not in any European competition the season after that. Now, that's why I'm hoping that this £55 million isn't just 55 million. Might be add-ons, to bring it to maybe 60. I don't know. I don't know the full details of this deal, whether it's 55 million and nothing else. There might be. Or what I'm hoping for is that we've slapped on a sell-on clause to that 55 million. Kudus is 24 years of age. He'll definitely move on from Spurs in the next couple of years or so, which is probably why they've given him a 6-year deal. So if they do have to sell him, then they want to try and get as much money back as they can. But when things are going bad for Spurs and they're not offering European football, if they don't sell him, they might end up having a player like we had at West Ham United last season. Looked like he didn't care, a little bit stroppy, so they'll probably decide it might be time to move him on. Now, we've heard so much about the tumultuous season Kudus had at well, didn't hear, we saw it for ourselves throughout last season. The falling out with Lopetegui after he was subbed against Brentford away last season. Now, I do wonder if he fell out because he didn't like Lopetegui's reasons or just didn't like being subbed. Then his flare-up against Spurs, ironically against Spurs, which resulted in him getting a 5-match ban. And then when he returned, his body language screamed that he no longer wanted to be at the football club. I made excuses for him at the time by saying that he was being played out of position. The only way we're going to get anything good out of him is playing him in his favoured position, etc. But I've changed my mind. Of course I would. Let's be honest, a great player will perform in any position he's given, especially an attacking player. And there's been a lot of talk, ironically, about Kudus's versatility. One of the reasons, apparently, why Frank wants him at Spurs is because of his versatility. I wonder what he's going to do if he starts playing Kudus out on the left. Anyway, as much as I would have been happy for Kudus to stay, he stood out like a sore thumb at West Ham for most of the 2 seasons he was with us. It was only really the first part of the first season at the club that he seemed to do quite well on a regular basis because David Moyes found a formula that accommodated both him and Jared Bowen in the same team. However, our consistent need to have someone playing out on the left of attack finally saw Moyes kind of give in, and he put Kudus out there. Let's not forget we sold Ben Rama, we sold Fornals, who were going to be playing on that left-hand side, and in a way, Moyes forced his own hand to play Kudus out on the left. But then when Lopetegui came, he did the same. And then when Potter came, he did exactly the same again. And it was evident that he wasn't enjoying his role out on the left-hand side. So we bid him farewell, but I certainly won't bid him. But I certainly won't wish him luck. It seems clear that Potter has plans as to what he needs to do with the money that's now being generated, and I dare say, or at least I hope, that we will see the money being put to good use now. Slavia Prague has been waiting patiently in the wings for us to finally seal the deal for left wing back Malik Diouf to make his way to East London. And thank goodness we've actually got a good relationship with Slavia Prague, one of the few clubs around that we do have a good relationship with. And they look as if they've been willing to wait for us to come back to seal the deal. The owners of West Ham and Slavia Prague have been in constant dialogue, with the message being that we want the player, but we've just got to be given a few more days to get the Kudus deal over the line. And that is now what seems to have happened. So we must sell in order to buy. Strategy has been realized. That wasn't a fantasy, that was a reality. But now, with 55 million coming, PSR has been eased, and with the money on the way, there's absolutely no reason why we need to wait any longer to start doing our transfer business. Once the Malik Diouf deal is done, I'm expecting to see at least another 2 deals happen pretty imminently. With all the money only going on new players, it means we do not have to sell again for a while. The Kudus deal will easily see us get at least 3 players over the line. I would imagine, or at least I would hope, that Graham Potter and Carl McCauley were consulted over the deal that was happening for Kudus to leave for 55 million. And I would hope that they would feel that it's adequate to help them start getting players into the club. But many fans would point to his form last season and suggest that he kind of ensured that he was going to go on the cheap, go for a low price because of the way he played. Look, it's done, as close to being done as dusted. What I want to see now is movement, and movement really fast. I want to see West Ham to have signed at least 1 player by the end of Thursday or by the end of Friday, or at least 2 players at the very least by the end of this week before the weekend comes. Maybe there's a silver lining to all this, but as it stands, West Ham fans are not seeing it right now, and rightly so. I understand it. All right, some other brief news before I go. There was an apparent welcome news about Lucas Paqueta's situation, where the FA seemed to be setting a precedent on the potential punishment that the player might get should he be found guilty of spot fixing charges. But alas, when I read the details a bit more, I realised that the case that the West Ham Zone social media channel was referring to was more like the Ivan Toney case rather than the Lucas Paqueta case. They repeated a report that was put out by BBC Shropshire, where Cheltenham Town forward Ryan Bowman is set to face a 42-month ban for breaking betting rules. The player is said to have placed several thousand bets over a number of years. West Ham Zone went on to say that given Paqueta didn't place any bets himself, it'd be unjust if he was given a lifetime ban. But as I have explained, and several others have explained several times over, spot fixing charges that have been levied against Lucas Paqueta are not the same as placing bets in the same way that Ivan Toney or this player, Ryan Bowman, have done. So sorry to disappoint you, West Ham Zone. The 2 issues can't be compared. So it doesn't set a precedence as to what ban Paqueta might get if he's found guilty. And finally, West Ham have apparently received an offer from Brazilian club Botafogo for the services of Luis Guilherme. But the response from the player's camp is that he wishes to remain in Europe rather than a return to Brazil. Not just yet anyway. With Mohammed Kudus on the move, there's a very good chance that Guilherme is more than likely to exceed the 13 appearances that he made for West Ham last season. And I guess, we're holding a lot of hope. He's had a taste of Premier League football. He's had a bit of a taste. Why not now? look at how we can use him and Crescencio Somerville, who's come back from injury, how we can use them to forget about Mohammed Kudus altogether. Thank you for watching and listening. Bit somber, but there you go. I'll be back again probably later with some updated transfer news, so do watch out for that. But in the meantime, if you've enjoyed this show, please do hit the like button. And if you've yet to subscribe, please do become a subscriber. And my appeal to you Ghanaian fans who probably only subscribe to this channel because of Kudus, stick around. You might enjoy West Ham more than just it all being about Mohammed Kudus. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you all soon.